Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Soapbox. Today's topic is strengthening in parallel and the importance of it not only for dancers but also in regular people in rehabbing but also preventing knee injury. So I thought I'd take the first few minutes here to kind of go over some basic anatomy of the knee. So we have our femur right here, our thigh bone. We have our tibia bone, which is the inside shin bone. And we also have our fibula, which is the outside shin bone, okay? And together, they make up the knee joint. We have our kneecap, or patella, sitting right over top. And this tendon, it's just kind of cut at the top here, but this would be coming from the quadriceps. So all the muscles, there's four main muscles of the quads, they sit in the front of the thigh. They come down, collect into a common tendon called the patellar tendon, cross the knee and attach onto the tibial tuberosity, a little bump on the top of the shin bone there. So when the quads contract, okay, they're gonna kind of not only extend the knee, but they're gonna kind of pull that patella upwards. And with ideal alignment, we want that patella to be sitting in that groove nicely and gliding nicely with every contraction or movement of the knee. So, few things that can happen. If there's a hip weakness, okay, so say glute med is a common muscle, it's a deep muscle of the glute, and its job is to properly transfer your weight over that hip in standing and also create a bit of external rotation of the thigh bone along with the deep rotators as you try to maintain your turnout or as you weight bear on the leg. So, if we go to bend the knee, but our glute is weak and it's not loading properly, that knee is going to kind of collapse in, or kind of, you'll have kissing knees. If you go to do a squat, they'll kind of collapse in. We call that a valgus. And so that's just going to create a bit of torque at the knee and also kind of muck up the tracking of the kneecap. The other thing that can happen is, say in dancers, they stand and turn out. If they crank at the feet or they over-rotate at the feet, and they're not truly holding that from the hip, they crank their feet, that's going to add a torque or a torsion, call that a bit of tibial torsion, and now they're landing, doing their plies with a torqued tibia, and that's also going to muck up the tracking. So if the knee's collapsing in, it causes tightness on the outside of the leg, and again, it can cause some irritation of the kneecap. So the number one thing that I kind of start these people with, if I notice a bit of that glute med weakness or poor knee tracking, is we start strengthening them in parallel, okay? We need to start strengthening the hip so the knee can track properly, essentially. And also give people awareness of where their feet are in relation to the knee, in relation to the hip. So whenever we bend the knee, it should always be tracking over that second toe. So if we're standing in a bit of rotation or we're standing in our first position or we're parallel, doesn't matter. When you go to bend the knee, that kneecap should be tracking over the second toe. All right, so in this first video, I've taken a video of four of the girls in my dance medicine class, and we're just analyzing our squats. So I've used a slow motion function on the iPhone, and it's actually quite fun. I get the kids to video each other in partners and then analyze the video after, because a lot of these landing and takeoff things in their technique, it's hard to feel sometimes, and even with a mirror, it's a fast movement, so it's hard to tell. So I just want you to see their squat prepping for a squat jump. Again, notice this is in parallel, and I am really clear when I explain to the kids, a squat is different than a plie. Lots are different, and they usually are bad at squats because they're confusing with the plie, and I find that isn't differentiated in a clinic when they go to a regular physio and they're like, okay, well, why am I doing squats, and how is this important for my dancing? So if you look at their squats, we'll play it here in a second, but I want you to notice, A, are the knees collapsing in? Do they look like they're going to kiss each other either on their jump prep or on their landing, okay? And regularly I would have a client do just squats. So the squat jump would be a bit of a progression. But in a squat, are their knees falling in? I'm also watching, are they able to flex at the hip? So are they able to like pitch their torso forward and sit their hips back? This is one of the main things that makes it very different from a plie, because our shoulders in a plie are stacked over our hips instead of really folding forward at the hip. So I make that distinction right off the get-go that yes, this is different than a plie, but it's still important for your body to know how to do. So I just want you to watch and see, are the knees collapsing in on the takeoff or landing? Are they equal weight on both feet? And are they able to flex at the hip?
Okay, so I just want you to watch whose knees collapse in. You can see it, the girl second to the left on her next push-off, they're going to collapse in. Also the girl on her far left, her left knee for some reason will fall valgus or collapse in a little bit more than her right. So interesting to see the differences side to side as well. We're going to watch it one more time because I know that was really fast. So look at the girl on the far right now, and just notice how she likes to stand in a little bit of a turned out position of the feet. For her, a little bit more than the right than the left, and that right knee does collapse in a little bit more than that left side. And then the girl second to the right, just have a look at her right side. She seems to be weight bearing a little bit more on that leg, and the knee is falling in a little bit more on that side as well. So lots of different variations and presentations from student to student.
Okay, so once they have mastered a squat, I would have them practice squats about 10 times with a 10-second hold, really retraining their body that their knee has to be aligned over their second toe. Weight has to be back in the heels a little bit to take the pressure out of the front of the knee. And they're sitting forward with their torso. So they're really flexing at the hips, sitting their sits bones back. So those are the three main things. Once they mastered a squat, then we're going on to the squat jumps that you've seen. So a little more complex, again, only working in parallel to start. Now, the progression would be, let's start practicing this on one leg. So instead of jumping right into a one-legged squat, which is very hard to do, even for me, is you would start with like a split squat or like a baby lunge. So we're going to see on Miss Zay in this next video, my progression and how each section would be something to progress your class with or progress with once they've mastered the basic skill.
So part one, I'd have the student in a split squat position, shoulders stacked over hips, equal weight both feet. I'm cueing the student to slightly rotate that front thigh bone outwards to ensure proper tracking of that front knee over the second toe. Once the student has mastered this, then we start progressing onto transfer onto the front leg or one leg stability. So here is the second progression. Miss Zay is going to transfer her weight on that front leg, and she's trying to maintain that external rotation of the thigh bone to not let that knee collapse in. We're going to look at it now on a few different bodies and just notice what happens as soon as they start to lift the leg. That knee's going to want to collapse in. They have to use their rotators, that glute med, to rotate that thigh bone out, so to ensure proper knee tracking, and then they hold it there and step back. And this would be the second progression.
So once they can hold that fondue, the next progression, adding movement to that, is they have to reach down and touch the floor with the opposite hand, call it like the little running man exercise, and they have to come back up into fondue, and again, trying to maintain the control of the standing leg.
So once they can hold that fondue, the third progression is this little running man, again, where they reach down and touch the floor with the opposite hand, and they're trying not to touch the floor with the foot in between. Usually, I try to get them to do 5 to 10 in a row, again, to maintain the endurance of that glute med on the standing side. And if we looked at it in these other bodies here, just notice all the different presentations. It's super hard, and it's usually harder in parallel than it is in turnout for these kids, but it also is encouraging a squared hip on the standing leg.
Which is super important, not only if you're a dancer, but this is a great, if you're an avid runner, great runner progression, because if runners are having any knee or hip pain, even some low back, they usually have to strengthen the standing leg, because when they go to heel strike or they're going to like take a step with their stride, their knee is likely collapsing in a little bit due to that hip weakness. So this is probably my go-to for quite a few people. And it's great to include in even a dance warm-up as just some basic parallel strengthening to start. We want to strengthen them in parallel and then move on to the more complex movement of a plie. All right, so just to recap, the first thing you would start with is ensuring your students can do a proper squat in parallel. Feet hip distance apart, knees over second toe, sitting the hips back and down. Once they've mastered that, then I would progress to a squat jump. Again, use the slow-mo feature on your phone. You can get the students to partner up and analyze their technique. It's quite helpful to watch in slow-mo. Make sure that they're kind of having that slight rotation of the thigh bones to ensure knee alignment on their takeoff and also on their landing. And also ensure that they're not kind of sneaking their feet out into turnout with repetition. The third step would be a split squat. So ensuring that they can maintain the rotation of that thigh bone, that knee alignment of the front leg. Step 4 would be, can they transfer their weight properly onto fondue and hold? This could be like 10 to 20 second holds. The fifth step would be adding movement to that fondue, so the little running man progression. So seeing if they can reach down and touch the floor with the opposite hand, keeping their hips square to the ground and coming back up. Again, reps of about 5 to 10, ensuring a slow and controlled movement with proper alignment. Next episode, I really want to go into depth with, okay, if they're weak with those deep rotators, how can I start strengthening them? And again, maybe adding it to a warm-up or class strengthening idea. So tune in a couple weeks and we'll dive right deep into the hip and talk about the deep rotators that we need to hold our turnout. Because you don't need to grip those glutes. It's a thing. So anyways, thanks so much, guys. That's the Soapbox, and I'm Danny West.